Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So today is going to be the first in what may well be a very lengthy series of videos. We're going to explore different what-if, disaster/apocalypse scenarios based on the Conflicted card game and a recent poll I conducted on the community tab. You can also partake in this poll by clicking the card in the top right corner. So let's talk about what the Conflicted card game is and discuss the first survival scenario of this series. So just so I don't seem like a copycat, I want to send a shout out to Prepper Logic, who has been doing videos about the Conflicted card game for some time now. I've known about this game for many years, but I just never got around to picking one up. So what is the Conflicted card game? Well, there's two different aspects to the game. You can buy individual decks, of which there are 10 decks, or you can actually buy the board game. Now, in terms of the decks, every deck is unique. It deals with a specific subject matter related to disaster preparedness. This is your standard 52 count deck of cards, but on the cards you're going to either have survival tips or you're going to have different questions and scenarios which are meant to provide thought exercises for you and your prepping friends. I'm going to do a whole review on the board game itself because it's very in-depth and it's really a beautiful board game. The different cards and the level of detail that has been put in the game is just amazing. It really gets you thinking, it gets you using your imagination unlike a video game, and it makes for some good fun for teenagers and up. Now, the actual decks of cards are standalone, so you don't need the board game in order to use the deck of cards. So the deck of cards that I'm drawing from today is the Downfall deck. And on each one of these cards, there are these different scenarios. And how it's going to work for the series is I'm going to draw a card from the deck, and I'm going to make a poll on the basis of the scenario that is on that card. I feel that this is really going to get the community interacting and engaged with the content on this channel a bit more. And hopefully it's going to provide different strategies to help people deliberate what may well be life or death situations in a disaster scenario. So the first question, and I have to summarize these when I do the polls because YouTube only allows you to write so much. So I said basically the S hit the fan and your neighbor's home has been ransacked by a mob, roughly a dozen people. You hear screams from their house. Now the mob has passed over your house and you'll probably be okay, at least for the time being. You have limited ammo and you're the only one protecting your family. Do you A, keep quiet, save your family, it's everyone for themselves now? That response got 53%, so the majority of people said, not my problem, I ain't getting involved with that. Option B, get the mob's attention and try to negotiate. That was 2%, and I'm going to be honest, that was mostly a filler because I knew most people wouldn't want to pick that one, but I'm trying to get as many potential responses as I can. 3 is go in there with weapons drawn and give the mob an opportunity to run. So more of an assertive approach, and 7% of people chose that option. Option D was the John Wayne option. Go in there in a blaze of glory, ask no questions, terminate indiscriminately. 27%. So we got 27% who are heroes, or at least would like to be heroes. Other is 12%. Now, there's 690 comments and 5,100 votes, which is very good for a YouTube poll, and that's only 8 hours in. By the time this video is posted, it may well be 2,000 to 3,000 more than that. Now, it's easy to get caught up in the details of a question like this and say, well, you know, how many people exactly were there? Were they armed? Was it nighttime? What sort of disaster scenario was it that precipitated all of this? Are you friends with your neighbors, etc.? But the crux of this question is very simple. Basically, it's asking, are you willing to put yourself and your family on the line to help somebody else? Now, obviously, there's going to be a whole lot more nuance to that. But generally speaking, the situation is such that if you do nothing now, there's a good chance that these guys are going to come back and mess with you in the future, and you're potentially going to be in a worse off position because now you're not going to have your neighbors and you're not going to have the element of surprise. I'm not sure if there's a term for this sort of tactical quandary, which is basically you do something now, there's a better chance you'll succeed, but there's still a chance that you'll perish. Or you can do nothing now and hope that nothing happens in the future, but if something does happen in the future, it's going to be really bad for you, potentially worse, because you're not going to have backup, and of course, you're going to have your conscience to live with, and not having helped your neighbor out. There could be women and children in there, a lot of the other contextual stuff. Now, on the surface, most of us would probably like to help our neighbor regardless of whether they had overgrown shrubs growing into our yard for years or not. But in the heat of the moment, a lot of people are going to freeze and a lot of people are going to flight. I watched a video recently which was kind of a Kitty Genovese situation where you had a whole neighborhood of people watch a woman scream for her life and get kidnapped in this vehicle, and they all just stood there and did absolutely nothing. They didn't try to get a license plate. They didn't try to physically save her. They didn't even try to scream and shout and get the attention of the perpetrator. Now, you could make the argument that they didn't know that this person was armed or whatever the case might be. But this is a classic example of the bystander effect. And you can rest assured that you're not going to be the only neighbor on this street who is having this deliberation. One thing to keep in mind here is that you do have the element of surprise. Yes, you don't know if these individuals are armed. They probably are. Just remember, bad guys are not invincible. They're scared too. And if there's a dozen of them taking out a family, that's an indication of a special type of cowardice that you can exploit, which seeks safety in numbers and will only attack somebody if they have the upper hand. Furthermore, if they are so unprepared that they have to ransack people's houses in a situation like this, instead of being more creative in terms of how they survive, you know that they are mentally limited in some way, shape, or form because they're acting on impulse. This means that if you can keep a cool head and prey on these psychological weaknesses they have, their numbers aren't going to mean as much. And if you can catch them off guard, that may send them running. So I personally find myself inclined towards the 47% group here, in that I think to do nothing is probably not very strategic. Whether you're in it just to save yourself or you're out there to save the world, it just doesn't strike me as strategic to turn tail and do nothing. Even if you knew there was a good chance, it might be a lost cause. Just the fact that that may come back to you in the future, because remember, once these guys get a taste of looting and scavenging, they're going to keep doing it, especially if they go unchecked. But if you zap the rat right from the start, they're going to become very averse or very discouraged from doing that activity once again, because they're going to fear the negative consequences that comes with it. Now, let's go see what the community had to say about this situation. Alright, so some comedic relief right from the start. My neighbors are a-holes, torch the place. That's pretty harsh. I mean, they must be pretty big a-holes. But then again, in the modern age, a lot of people have no affinity with their neighbors whatsoever. It's not the way it used to be. So I can understand why, your neighbor may just be like another person to you if you have absolutely no connection with them whatsoever. Next comment: if your house is not next today, it will be tomorrow. Eliminate the threat, set the standard so everyone knows, just like the store owners in the LA riots. Indeed, if you make yourself a hard target right from the start, if you set the precedent, if you confront the bully right from the get-go, maybe they'll stop bullying you. But then again, desperate people do desperate things. You may be outnumbered, but at the same time, you may also win the respect of your neighbors. It may also provide other people within your community hope that if you work as a team, you can actually resist this criminal element from perpetrating these types of acts. Okay, so this was an interesting one. Define limited ammo. If it's my home, I don't have limited ammo. As a cop, I'm used to dealing with mobs without rule of law to stop me. I'm going to just interject right here and say, as a police officer, your presence kind of precedes you when dealing with a mob. So a lot of people are going to be less inclined to fully act out if there's a Leo present. So that's just something to bear in mind, that in a without rule of law situation, when you're in a uniform and that uniform is backed by the state, people are going to be less inclined to mess with you just on the basis of that alone. That's why, 50 riot police can basically contain 500 to thousands of people. It's not the physical force people fear, it's the rule of law. Now, if that badge and that rule of law is no longer recognized and you're still approaching the situation with that advantageous mindset, then it may be problematic. I'm not saying this is going to override your capabilities and skills. This is just a psychological factor for you to bear in mind. Okay, so without rule of law to stop me, I'll set up a position, see what weapons they have. If I feel I have a distinct weapons advantage, and maybe even if I don't depend on the situation otherwise, I retreat. Cap the leaders right off the bat. Mobs are cowardly at heart and tend to fall apart once examples are made. So it sounds like we see eye to eye on that point. If the mob is small, only a dozen, it will be easy to stop. At that point, if I'm not allied with my neighbors, well, I need supplies. I'm going to work out a deal for saving them one way or another. I don't do shit for free. I'm not trying to sound badass, but a dozen people, especially unarmed, doesn't scare me very badly unless they are all up in the house. Then that would be a factor in the decision. Iberian Hero says, I choose other. I would take up a sniping position and eliminate as many as I could when they exit. I would then draw them away on a merry chase. I live in a fairly remote location in a Mark Twain National Forest and know my area very well. So this may work, or I may be caught or killed. Either way, I wouldn't just sit back and do nothing, because when the supplies they looted run out, we would most likely be next. Great scenario to question. Thanks, CP. Well, thank the Conflicted card game, and if you want one, pick one up at CanadianPreparedness.com. The Rev JJ comments about the fact that unless you really know the context of this event, it's really hard to make a decision. But he does say that I would likely defend my neighbor as long as it didn't endanger myself or my family. In all reality, were my neighbor's house to be ransacked, they would have to be either way or already dead, as they would be fighting back. The problem is, you don't know what's going on when they're in the house. They could be being kidnapped, they could be being assaulted, the women could be assaulted, and any intervention in a situation like this is going to endanger you in some way, shape, or form. There's no way getting around that. Another way to think about this is, let's say it was you that was getting ransacked, and I know you probably got all sorts of booby traps and, you know, this could never happen to you, but what if they got the jump on you somehow? Would you then want your neighbors to help you? Obviously, you would hope, maybe not expect, that somebody would do something. Pitchlink Online says exactly what Bad Raccoon said. Take them out, not in a blaze of glory style. Take them out methodically. Hit the apparent leaders first. You can't let them go because eventually they'll come for your house and you will have to deal with them. At least in this scenario, you know exactly where there are and how many. If you let them go, you won't know when they're coming back and they'll possibly surprise you. So once again, it seems like we're on the same wavelength here. We all recognize that this is a tactical quandary of sorts. Whereas if you don't act right now, you're going to lose the element of surprise. Bob W. says, somewhat disappointed that 55% chose to be cowards. Predators don't move from areas until they're sure there's nothing left worth anything. Today it's your neighbors, tomorrow it might be you, etc., etc. Help your friends and neighbors because you can't survive all alone. Curtis says, country folk here. My nearest neighbor is 2 miles away. We are both preppers and we have talked and already made plans. We have communication, so if such an event occurs, we can communicate with each other and help each other out. One of the most important things to take away from this is that your neighbors aren't going anywhere. Chances are they're going to bug in, and you are going to be burdened with them in some way, shape, or form, whether you like it or not. Either they're going to eventually become your enemies, and they're going to be joining the looters and ransacking your house, and just like Bad Raccoon said, expect something in return if you're offering them assistance. Fudo Film says, always take out the leader first. Mobs are usually punks. My dad and his friend got surrounded by 20 guys leaving the bar in Germany. He grabbed his knife and stabbed the first guy, and the rest ran away when they saw what happened. The physics of a mob are very much the same as the physics of a swarm. There's going to be a critical mass within the mob, maybe 2 or 3 people out of the dozen, that if they bolt and take off, the rest are going to follow. And the reverse of that is also true. If 2 or 3 of them attack, especially if they're like the leadership, then the mob is going to follow in suit in an unthinking manner. So it's all about triggering that critical mass in the opposite direction. If you look at a swarm of starlings, a few of them have to shift directions, and it's like a domino effect. And that's how a mob functions also. So you have that to your advantage. You're not really facing 12 people necessarily. You're facing the leaders and a bunch of followers. Now, deciphering who is the leader is not necessarily always going to be easy. It's probably going to be the person who, if you make yourself known, they're going to be the ones that come after you first. But generally speaking, the alpha of any group is going to be the first one to engage because they're the decision makers. If you can bring a little bit of your own chaos to the situation, then a lot of these cowards who are just hiding behind the safety of numbers, once they feel that there's a chance that they're going to get hurt, they will likely hit the road. But they're going to respond to the cues of the leadership of the group. If the leadership takes off, they're going to take off. If the leadership attacks, depending on the loyalty to the leader, then they're going to back them up. So for the sake of this video not dragging on too long, I'm going to post a link to the poll in the description. You can go and check it out and do the poll on this video as well. And it'll be interesting to see if the results of the poll are any different now that I've shared my own and other people's thoughts on it. If you want to pick up this conflicted card game, this is a one-of-a-kind game, and it's the only game we actually retail at CanadianPreparedness.com. We also have the decks. I believe the decks are $18.99 each or something like that. I'm going to post a 15% coupon code for the decks and the actual board game itself. In summary, the best advice I can glean from the community is be methodical, have a plan of action should something like this occur, do the appropriate threat assessment, target the mob's leadership, and hopefully you can do it all from a safe enough vantage point. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this channel is by gearing up through CanadianPreparedness.com. We got high quality gear, and I mean high quality gear only. There are free shipping options, and my subscribers get an exclusive discount of 10% off. Use coupon code SURVIVALPREPPER in all caps, one word, at the checkout. Thanks for your support.